I hadn't expected it to start snowing early. When I pulled back the curtains, the ground looked like it was covered by a layer of thick icing. The cabin even looked like a gingerbread house, the windows frosted and sugar icing on the roof. I had planned to drive home today, but standing next to my car with flakes still falling, I knew that wouldn't happen. I went back inside. It was a log cabin, my best buddy Mike's hunting cabin. The weird thing was, he'd never told me about it. On all our hunting trips, we'd rent a cabin. I couldn't figure out why he'd never told me he had one. It had been a while since I'd seen Mike. The last time was a year ago. He'd been erratic and strange. Stranger than usual. He was always a bit odd. He had all kinds of strange beliefs. I'd tried keeping my face impassive when he talked to me about them so he wouldn't see how incredulous I was. It was part of what made Mike interesting. Then last year was like he disappeared. I tried calling but never heard back. His phone was disconnected. I finally gave up. If he decided to move on without me, then I guess that was the way it was. He'd been going through a rough time. He'd gotten divorced, and his wife and kids moved across the country to Idaho. He was having trouble at work, and he started to drink heavily. I suspected he was also getting into drugs. The times we did talk, he was very strange. He would ramble cryptically, and I could sometimes barely follow what he was saying. I felt bad, but I started to dread the times I'd see him. I was still worried when I didn't hear from him. I figured whatever happened was probably drug-related and not good. I looked him up online, called his ex-wife, called his job, but nobody knew what happened to him. Then, after almost a year of nothing, I got a call a week and a half ago. It was from a hospital. Mike was dead. He'd killed himself by slitting his wrists. He had my name and phone number written on a piece of paper in his wallet. It was the only contact name he had on him, so they called me. It was like someone poured cold water on me. Even though I'd sometimes wondered the worst, now that he was dead, I couldn't believe it. He'd left me his hunting cabin, the one I'd never heard about. I drove up to the cabin yesterday. I wanted to see it and just be alone with my memories of Mike. I thought being in his cabin would make me feel closer to him. The cabin was up a dirt road. The woods were very quiet, the branches bare, and the air raw. I knew a storm was coming, but it wasn't supposed to start until I'd be back home. I was only staying one night. It had been a 4-hour drive. The cabin was cold, and the wind made the front porch creak. Inside, there were rustic chairs, an old overstuffed sofa, braided rugs, and some dated kitchen appliances. If I hoped I'd feel closer to Mike being here, I felt the opposite. The stillness made it all seem the more obvious he was dead. It felt empty, completely empty, and I felt like there was a void in my stomach. I walked around, looking at things and running my fingers over them. There were remnants of his personality. There were science fiction, philosophy books, and books on Eastern religions on the shelves. The cabin was small, and after I'd walked around it, I stood in the middle of the room. I thought maybe coming out here would help me feel better. I felt worse. I wanted to get back in my car and drive home, but I'd just come all this way and it was getting dark. I'd stay the night, get up early, and leave. That was what I'd wanted to do. I hadn't counted on being snowed in this morning. It was only getting deeper. Fortunately, there was some food. Mike must have been up here recently. There were packages of spaghetti, cans, and freeze-dried food. If I had to stay a little, then at least I had what I needed here. I lit a fire in the big fireplace and sat there poking the logs. They glowed red, the embers setting off little explosions of orange sparks as I moved them around. I knew I should call my wife. Strangely, I didn't want to talk to her. But it was already 9 o'clock, and I really needed to call to say I wouldn't be home today. I reached for my cell phone, but remembered it didn't work out here. There was a phone on the wall. I picked up the receiver and dialed. "It's me," I said when she picked up. "I'm snowed in. I don't think I'll be able to leave today." "When do you think you'll be able to get out?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Hopefully tomorrow." I hoped so, but I wasn't counting on it. The wind had picked up, and snow drifted against my car, the trees, and the front porch. "Do you have food?" she asked worriedly. "Yes. Mike kept this place pretty well stocked," I said. "I'll be fine." We said goodbye and I hung up and went back to the chair in front of the fireplace. I thought about making coffee, but I didn't feel like moving. The cabin had 3 rooms. There was the big room I was sitting in, which was a living room, kitchen, and dining room all combined. There was also a small bedroom and a bathroom. There was also a basement, but I hadn't been able to go down there. The door was locked, and there was a chain across the handle. I couldn't find a key, so I left it alone. When I put the house up for sale, I'd cut it off with bolt cutters and see what junk was down there. I was definitely selling the cabin. I was fairly sure of that before I'd even seen it. I was positive now. I didn't want it. The fire was very warm. I closed my eyes. I could hear the wind outside, cold and whirling. I also heard something else. It was a scraping sound, like metal being dragged across concrete. I opened my eyes and listened. The sound had stopped, but it came from below, from the basement. I didn't move. Everything was so quiet, I wondered if I had imagined it. Then I heard it again. Could it be the pipes? Something to do with the cold or the wind? I could still hear the sound, the metallic scraping against concrete. I got down on my hands and knees and put my ear to the floor. The sound stopped. I stayed there, my ear to the floor, to see if it started again. I did hear something, but a different kind of sound. It was a soft scraping right under my ear, as if someone were running their fingernails across the ceiling right under me. Was it rats? Mice? The soft scraping stopped. I took my ear from the floor. I wondered if a raccoon or some other animal could have gotten in, trying to get out of the cold. I couldn't go down and check because of the locked door. I decided an animal inside was the most likely answer. There was that metallic scraping again. There were windows outside that looked into the basement. Maybe I could see what was down there. I put on my coat and boots and opened the front door. It was still snowing hard, but the wind was much calmer. My boots sank into the snow as I stepped off the porch. I trudged over to one of the little basement windows, squatting down to look through. I couldn't see much beyond the window ledge. The light didn't go very far. There was another window on the other side of the house. I trudged over, but I couldn't see anything through that one either. If an animal had gotten in, I couldn't see how. The windows all looked secure, and there was no other way in that I could see. I went back inside. Even in the short time I was out, my socks were wet where the snow had gotten in my boots, and my jeans were encrusted in snow up to my knees. I jumped as I heard a bang from the basement. Whatever animal was down there, they'd gotten into something. I hoped it could get out the way it came in. I didn't want to try to get something outside when I finally went down there. I changed my jeans into something dry, and then began pacing around the cabin. I looked through the windows. I looked at the books on the shelves, but I didn't feel like reading any of them. I picked up the phone again. The line was dead. The storm must have taken out the phone lines. I went back to the easy chair and tried to take a nap. I wasn't tired. The basement was quiet. Maybe the animal had gotten out. I'm not much of a science fiction reader, but because I couldn't think of anything else to do, I finally picked up one of the books from the shelves. I started to read. I heard scratching at the basement door. It wasn't like a little animal scratching. It was like a hand with sharp fingernails reaching to the top of the door and then dragging the nails all the way to the bottom. My heart jumped and I felt the side of my face go numb. I stared at the door. The scraping had stopped. It seemed like everything had gotten very quiet. I felt frozen in the chair. Whatever was down there was no animal. The door handle turned. It was slow and deliberate. My eyes were glued to it. Whatever was on the other side pushed against the door, but it didn't open. The handle was twisted again, more savagely this time. The door still didn't open. Now I felt glad that chain was there, and that I hadn't found the key. "Who's there?" I yelled. There was no answer. Whoever was on the other side kept trying to push the door open. Was there a gun in here? I hadn't seen one. Why didn't Mike keep a gun? Why hadn't I brought one? I didn't think anyone could get through the door, not with that chain on it. I still reached out and grabbed the fire poker. It made me feel a little safer. From the other side of the door, I heard wood splinter. Then there was the sound of it being peeled away from the door. Then scratching, splintering again, more peeling. The fire poker didn't seem like enough now. I jumped up from the chair and grabbed my coat. I jammed on my boots and ran out the door, still clutching the poker. Maybe it wasn't much, but I didn't have anything else. Stumbling through the snow, I reached my car. Snow was drifted against the door. I couldn't open it. Frantically, I dug with my bare hands into the snow. I'd forgotten gloves. My hands were numb and red, but I barely noticed. I got enough snow out of the way that I could open the door. I got inside, slammed it shut, then locked myself in. Inside, the car was very dim, almost all the windows covered in snow. I could only see a little out the driver's side window. Some of the snow had fallen when I slammed the door. I peered out, but all I saw was falling snow and trees. I sat there, my breath forming clouds. There wasn't a sound. How long would I have to wait here? I couldn't go back in the house. I couldn't go anywhere in the car. I wasn't close enough to any place to walk for help, not in this weather. Underneath me, I heard scraping. My blood froze. It was like it was taunting me, a long, slow scraping, running down the metal of the underside of the car. The sound moved up the outside of the passenger door. I sat motionless. The scraping went across the roof of the car. It went right over my head. I moved away from the window. Part of me wanted to look out and try to see what was out there. The other part of me felt safer away from the window. Whatever it was, knew I was in the car. Of course it did. It could follow my footprints, and where else could I go? As long as I kept the doors locked, it couldn't get in. I felt something cold and wet on my forehead. I looked up. Above me was a sliver of light from outside. Some snowflakes fell through the opening. Another small shaft of light appeared on the other side of the car. It was shining in from where the metal on the roof was being peeled back. Now another little shaft of light in the side of the passenger door. The fire poker is sitting on the passenger seat. I grab it, but I know it's no use. It's biting into my hands as I sit here, hearing the scratching, ripping sound of metal, and watching the little slivers appear all around me.